Well, in the beginning, we measured our success by anecdotes, by just watching what happened with the young people, seeing if they stayed in touch with each other, seeing if they continued to view each other as human beings and not as part of a wide swath of people. And that was all playing out very well. After a few years, I think it was after 2 years, then we started to do surveys before and after camp. And we've done that all along now. And our surveys are created and tabulated by the University of Chicago's business school, actually. So they have no stake whatsoever in what we're trying to do. So it's easier for us to do a short-term survey, and like with the Israelis and the Palestinians, and we all ask them the same question in the beginning as at the end, and one of the questions is, do you believe that the people on the other side of your conflict deserve a state of their own? Okay, so when they first come, no, they don't. Okay, or a couple will say yes, but when they leave, most of them will say yes, they do. So that, I think that's successful up until that point. We've also had long-term studies done, and lots of people have done their doctoral dissertations on seeds of peace, so we have a collection of those as well. But, you know, we also look at what happens to the people as they get older. The oldest ones are now 34 years old. What are they doing? How are they trying to make an impact? Well, there's one seed, we call them all seeds. Was one seed sitting on the official negotiating team for the Palestinians. There's another one sitting on the official negotiating team for the Israelis. They may be the only ones who talk to each other, I don't know, but they do talk with each other. And one thing that we notice about the seeds is that having all had the same initiation to Seeds of Peace, the same camp program, they are very comfortable with each other and they trust each other. So you can put any two of them together and they'll trust each other. When I arrived here, there was an Israeli and a Palestinian seed who had dinner with Allison and me, and you know, we were sitting there and I said, Allison, I hope you realize this is unusual in the way things go. We have an Israeli and a Palestinian from Gaza chatting with each other as if they were longtime friends. Okay, they know each other, but they're not, you know, they just respect each other, and that's a lot how we judge whether we're successful or not. But I mean, there are members of Seeds of Peace who are very busy in the media, who are newscasters, who are making documentaries. One from Egypt made a documentary about the uprising last year, and it went all over the world, and it was the most popular documentary. And he got his friends together. They made up a song about it, about freedom, and they taught the people who actually in Tahrir Square for the uprising to revolution to sing parts of the song, and so the whole thing is real people singing a song about what they were doing, and it was great. And so the more they're able to do things like that, the more I think we're heading in the right direction.
Early on, I wanted to answer that question because I felt like what we're doing is really higher order of thinking, and there's so many basic needs. You think of Maslow, you know, there's so many people who don't have clean water and don't have food to eat, that if this isn't making a difference in the way that we think, I should be doing something else. And so it actually was difficult for me to find a researcher initially. And I finally found someone, Stephen Warshell, Dr. Warshell at the University of Hawaii, who has done work with Seeds of Peace, actually, and he was really interested because we're talking about long-term, engaging with young people over the long term, and because as a small nonprofit, my budget is a lot of air. He agreed to actually do this pro bono, and so what we were looking at was it's a lengthy questionnaire. It's about 100 questions. The kids pretty much hate it, I would say. Pretty accurate. Yeah. And it looks at several categories. It looks at, first of all, identity, how individuals identify, it gets demographic information. It looks at issues of self-esteem. It looks at issues of in-group, out-group. It looks at issues of conflict, sources of conflict. It looks at a sense of hopefulness. Because part of, I think, what is so difficult in these days is that it's pretty easy to feel pretty there's so many terrible things going on that, will this work create leaders that feel hopeful? And so we do a survey when they first come in, and then there's a whole section, and then they fill out the survey every year for, 4 years or as long as they're in the program. And there's a whole additional section each spring that looks at what trainings they took part in, what projects they were in, and if they were chair of the project, participant in the project, on the committee, because again, we're trying to look at, is it different if you take a leadership role rather than just showing up? And so, and then we survey the kids 1 year post and 3 years post. Pretty much all our kids go to college, so they're college students, and we ask them a series of questions. We knew we would never get them to fill out a 100-question questionnaire, unless we basically said, you can't leave the last meeting until you do it. So these are interviews that we do, that actually other alums do. They transcribe them. And so what we're hoping to do is sort of take, it starts out anecdotal, but when you start to get enough of these surveys, they start to really, you start to see patterns. So that what we're seeing is lots of kids, several kids have said, I don't really do anything relating to diversity work, but I'm the RA on my floor. Or everybody comes to me when there's a conflict because I know how to listen and I can ask questions. And so we're building that sort of anecdotal data, which we hope we'll be able to do work with. And then actually, after they go into the workforce, we're starting now to get their stories. Where are they now? To find out what work they're doing, what skills they're using. And I just actually was talking to some folks at Harvard Graduate School of Education, because I'm looking to find somebody now to actually take on this. I'm actually hoping to find somebody who's like waiting for the perfect PhD thesis, because what I think is, since we've changed our focus some and it's not solely religious, the questions really focus a lot on religious and ethnic identity, and I'm not sure we're asking the questions that I want to be asking in the future. So I'm looking to do some focus groups with the youth and our staff and say, how do we need to revise this? But I feel a really deep commitment to following the study long term, because what we're saying is, what we're doing is, so many programs are, get together and do activities, and we're saying, no, we're skill-based. You need to have certain tools in your pocket to be able to resolve conflict. So I want to know, do people have the skills? And then if they do, how are they using them? How does it impact their lives? So if you know anybody that's looking for a PhD thesis, I'll give you my card.
Right, well, as a student group, kind of picture your air for nonprofit, and then picture everyone else also working 40 hours a week in another job. And that's kind of what we have to work with. So we also have a high turnover rate, just because everyone's sort of moving quickly. So that being said, we have done a lot recently to start assessing our program. We started doing a lot of internal, more like within our members, but that was part of the reason we have shifted our focus from being ending violence in our communities to ending violence within the school. Is like instances of bullying in schools, that's something that they actually measure, and it's something that's in a contained environment that we work in. So rather than saying like, oh, there were less deaths in Roxbury this year, so that we had something to do with that, like that's pretty impossible to say. But if we're working in a school that had 30% less bullying, and that's something we can say perhaps we were attributable to that. So and that's something that we're trying to figure out how to do in a way that's also sustainable for our organization, but is effective. So that's where we're at with the assessment.
And we've been around since 1965. There's a lot of books about Corrymeela, there's documentaries, lots of dissertations about the work of Corrymeela. But I would say that just in terms of sort of studies around evaluation and that, we probably haven't been as diligent on some of this stuff as we could have and maybe should have been. And in the last 10 years, probably we've got sort of more sort of tuned into that, and mostly, to be honest with you, around the expectations of funders. Since the ceasefire, the European Parliament put a lot of money into Northern Ireland for peace building, and connected to that money was sort of needing to sort of demonstrate evidence of success or progress or whatever. So that forced a lot of non-profits in Northern Ireland to be thinking about evaluation and about how to sort of measure your impact on that. For me, and also we've been sort of like very clear that we're sort of more of an informal sort of education. We're very much about it's certainly there's a lot of skills building and also sort of human sort of connection. There's a lot of connections on this. Sitting right up, there's a lot of things that I'm hearing that really resonate with the work of Coromila. So in terms of relationships, like how do you measure sort of a change in sort of people's attitudes towards the different other that maybe would see them as a threat? Catholics would have seen Protestants as a threat, and are they now seeing them sort of any differently? Are they a gift in their lives instead of a threat? It's sort of a big sort of hope that we would have. So, and lots of stories, like, so I lived there and worked there for 5 years, and there wasn't a day in the week, 7 days a week, that you would see evidence of change, or you would see maybe somebody coming into the centre and saying, in 1972 I came here and I met for the first time a Catholic. So that sort of whole idea of crossing boundaries and sort of how that changed people's lives and their view of the different other. So it's a constant challenge for nonprofits to get smarter with these things and to be really sort of demonstrating sort of evidence of change.